Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of History You Didn't Know But Should. I'm Ray,
And I'm Chris.
and this episode is the latest in our series of haunted history, I guess we could say. And today we're going to be talking about, when I think about scary dolls, I think about, fictional dolls, maybe such as Chucky. But then I think about these other dolls that have some sort of historical basis to them. And, the first one that I think right now would come to everybody's mind is Annabelle. But the second one is something called Robert the Doll. And I want our listeners to know, in case he says otherwise, this topic was Chris's idea.
It's my idea. And the only reason it's my idea is because, I'll read the news just to see what's going on. Won't watch it, but I'll read it. And there was this article about Robert the Doll is wreaking havoc on people after 117 years. And it just caught my attention. And Ray, I kid you not, I read 3 sentences of it. I became spooked. It freaked me out. And immediately I forwarded it to you and I said, podcast on this, but I'm not reading anything else about this guy because it's messed me up. So, yeah, it's my idea because I knew you would love it. But, Ray, I'll tell you, I had to go back and do some research on it because we're talking about it today. And even then, it gave me the EBGBs or whatever you call it. I still to this day have this feeling. And it's weird because it's just a little boy in a sailor suit. But man, is there something powerful about it?
Well, Chris, that we might have to write a letter from the podcast History You Didn't Know But Should to Robert the Doll, care of, where is he located? Hang on. Care of, I want to make sure I get this right. Care of this museum. I can't
Fort East.
in
Fort
Key
East
West.
Martello Museum in Key
Yeah,
West, Florida.
there you go. In Key West, Florida. We might have to write a letter to Robert the Doll asking forgiveness for doing this episode.
Oh,
Otherwise,
yeah. Hey, Ray, I'm just telling the story. I ain't gonna talk
you
about this
might
stuff.
you might wake up in the middle of the night and there'd be a little Robert the Doll standing on your dresser.
So help me. So
I
help
am
me.
making this worse.
It is. And you know what? Our story goes right into that a little bit later when when Robert doesn't get his way, and or even when the owner of the dog doesn't get his way either. And I mean, that's the thing. I mean, we're talking about the story of Robert the doll, and it goes back, I mean, to the early 1900s. And I mean, Ray, all of us at some time or another have had a pet doll or something as animal, something though, a snuggly bear or a rabbit or a doll. I mean, everybody's had something that it was their comfort tool. And I think if we look at it, that's kind of how Robert starts out, right? Robert basically, he's it's a handmade doll, and it was given to him by a servant that worked for his parents, and it was just something for Robert to have. And but oh my gosh, right? It didn't take long, and Robert became more than just a handmade doll.
Yeah, it was a gift, like you said, to a young boy in October of 1900. This legend of Robert the Doll goes back 123 years because Robert the Doll was given to Robert Eugene, who goes by or who went by Gene before he passed away, I believe in the 1970s. Um, Robert the Doll was given to him on October 25, 1900. So almost, we're a little over 123 years after that event. And like you say, if you go and you look at a picture of Robert the Doll, he's a stuffed doll, not even a very impressive stuffed doll. And he's designed to look like a little sailor. And he's got in his hand, what is that? Uh,
Some people say that it's like a little dog.
a little dog. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a dog's got these big popping eyes on it, and it's got this too big tongue kind of hanging
Yeah.
crazily out of his mouth. And I mean, the thing is that it was an ordinary dog. And, Gene would say that he became lifelong friends with this doll, but it wasn't
Yeah.
long before something really out of the ordinary starts happening. And Ray, it was this first story, and even now, as we're about to tell it, I I just have this fear of something like that happening to me in the middle of the night. That would I don't even know if I could sleep in the same room anymore if what we're about to say happened. And that's the very first thing. So Ray, since you love this stuff, what was it about old Gene and Robert that first night that really started turning this into anything but an ordinary event?
Well, leading up to that, I'm going to drag this out. Leading up to that, as soon as Gene gets this doll from the servant, he starts spending a lot of time with the doll. But when something bad would happen, let's say if little Gene did something bad, little Gene broke the vase, little Gene, whatever, he blamed it on the doll. So every time something would go missing or something would be broken, Gene would say, Robert did it. Robert the doll did it. And then, Chris, it gets to be a little weirder because his parents, and you have children, and let me ask you a question, Chris. His parents hear him at first carrying on a conversation, a one-way conversation where where little Gene is talking to the doll. And then, lo and behold, Chris, the doll they hear starts talking back, and they even hear the doll giggling. Um, when the boy is talking to it. So how would you act if you
We'd be going down to Dollar General and Walmart and be finding something else. And Robert the doll would have been somewhere else because we ain't having no. I mean, look, I get nervous when Woody from Toy Story and you pull the trigger on the back of him and he starts saying something, he can mess you up. So forget about this doll right here. I mean,
Yeah, getting to your first night, though, I'm going to tell you a story. One of my uncles, you remember in the 1980s, Teddy Ruxpin,
oh yeah,
that little demon doll that you put the little cassette tape in and it talked or
yeah.
sang or whatever it did. My cousins had one of those, and my uncle said he was home alone one night and he walked by the room, and I guess it was left on. And I guess when he walked by and his shadow hit that doll or whatever it was, that thing went, hello. You would have been done.
I would flip out. Yeah. I mean, because imagine, I mean, here I am, 49 years of age and still flipping out. And, Robert's 10 years old and he's gone to bed with Gene, excuse me, is 10 years old. He's gone to bed with Robert the doll one night. And the next thing you know is Gene wakes up and Robert the doll is sitting at the end of the bed, just staring at him. That
Throwing
does it for me. Yeah.
furniture is flying through the air, and that's what his mom walks into.
But his mom tries to walk into it. But the problem is that Gene's crying for help. He's begging for the mother to come. You've got furniture overturned. The door is locked, and here is Gene, who is all curled up on the fear on his bed, and his room's in shambles. And there's Robert, the doll, looking this devilish grin on his face. And immediately Gene, the only words that he can get out is, Robert did it. Robert did it. And the question is, how could Robert, a handmade doll, do it? Because it's just a handmade doll. But it doesn't stop with that one occurrence, does it?
No,
I mean,
but go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's constant. And Gene's parents, they're hearing the conversations as you mentioned, and then they start seeing the doll speak and witnessing his expressions change and all of these things. I mean, and yet Robert continues to live with Gene. I don't get it.
I don't get it either. And we'll come back to that. But why, if I had walked into a room and that doll is sitting there grinning and furniture's flying, guess what? We having ourselves a bonfire that evening. And we're gonna get rid of that doll.
Look, I would have driven to the dump in the state of South Carolina and tried to get that thing as far away from me as possible.
Now, you say it was just a doll, but I believe I read somewhere in research, Chris, that the servant who gave the doll to the boy was into witchcraft. Did you read that?
So I did not read that part of it, but I can understand then how that does come into play, with this. And then you have to understand that if this servant was involved in witchcraft, then that's something that Gene has seen in his lifetime too, because it is a servant of the parent. So he's probably witnessing some of this, which does lead into the ability for him to maybe think also that there's some witchcraft going on or some sorcery or something. So yeah, I could see how that all plays out, because he's not the only one that starts seeing these things.
No.
He's not the only one that experiences, Robert the doll being Robert the evil one. And I don't know that, so to me, and there's so many different weird things about this. And I think the first thing is weird is the whole mom and daddy didn't do anything about it. That's just really, really, really messed up. But the second thing that I really have a hard time with is that Robert's parents die, or excuse me, Gene's parents die.
Yeah.
And Gene moves back into his parents' house.
With a wife. Yeah.
With a wife. But he brings Robert the doll back with him.
He finds the doll, yeah.
And then he thinks that the doll needs a room of his own and gives him a room with a view where he's upstairs looking over the street. I mean, you just got married. And the one thing you tell your wife is, hey, by the way, I'm going to bring my doll with us into the relationship. And in addition, not only am I bringing the doll into our relationship, I want to give him his own room that has a view.
He didn't refer to Robert as a doll.
No.
He referred to him as a boy, and he referred to him in the first person.
Yes.
About the doll as if the doll was a person or a being, a living being.
And what does the wife do? The wife says, that's a hard no. There's no way. If you're going to bring this doll into this house, that doll wants to be locked up in the attic where he can do no harm, see no harm, be of harm. And Gene, the ever faithful husband, wanting to keep peace in the house, says,
eventually
says, okay, I'll do it. And so Ray, Gene ain't happy with where Robert the doll is being placed, but even old Robert the doll becomes very unhappy with his new digs, and all of a sudden people that start coming to the house start to hear the footsteps in the attic, someone pacing back and forth. You've got the devilish giggling, and the children in the neighborhood look up and they see out the window, there's Robert sitting right there, he's watching. And I mean, this is like really just messed up.
But Robert, but go ahead.
No, that's just because I remember reading that the kids went, they looked up and they saw Robert like out the window. And so they go and say, hey, Mr. Gene, you got a doll looking out the window and he's doing all these weird things. And Gene goes upstairs to the attic. He opens up the door, and there he finds Robert sitting in a rocking chair by the window, and he moves them, he hides them, he does whatever, and then it happens again, and he finds Robert by the window sitting in the same rocking chair. He moves them and all. I mean, after a while, you have to blame this on the guy, Gene.
Yeah, well, the doll, Robert didn't want to be away from the window. He wanted to see everybody in the neighborhood.
But, and I just can't get why Gene, unless he just accepted it and he enjoyed it. I don't know. But, I think the one thing that really then comes into this is the danger that happens not just to Gene's family, but the legacy that gets left behind with Robert the doll, because after a while, Gene's going to die.
Yeah, Gene dies in 1974. And the doll, like the house, I guess, passes on to another person by the lady of Myrtle Reuter,
Yeah.
and I think that's how you pronounce her name. And she keeps the doll for quite a number of years, what, 20 some years. She keeps the doll from what, the late, mid to late, well, post 1974, so late 70s to the mid 1990s. She keeps the doll, and I think it's her daughter, if I remember correctly, told her, that thing's no good. You need to get rid of it, but she didn't.
And so this has been going on for 117 years.
Mhm.
And instead of taking this doll and, as you have said, burning the doll, or me throwing it in the dump, Robert lives in a prized possession. He is
Yeah.
not banished to obscurity, but rather he is in a museum and in an enclosed case,
Mhm.
and people flock
He's very
to
happy with it,
see
apparently.
Robert the doll, to the point that he gets love letters.
Yep.
They write letters to him. I think the article said he gets 1 to 3 letters a day.
Mhm. He's getting fan mail.
But it's not fan mail,
No, well,
because
it's
what these individuals are doing is they're writing to say, I'm sorry for disrespecting you.
mhm.
I'm sorry for being ugly. Would you please forgive me? Because they feel that Robert is harming them and taunting them and causing a car accident or causing this and causing that. And that you have these people who are saying, hey, I'm sorry, will you forgive me? But in addition, they're also writing him saying, hey, um,
You're great, Robert the doll.
yeah, you're the great Robert. They're all, hey, this person in my life is a jerk. So could you like hurt them? Could you do something? And
First them instead of me.
yeah, I mean, could you go by? And so I don't know. And Ray, I couldn't work in a museum in which Robert the doll is there, but yet
No.
they do it.
Well, I probably could with Robert the doll, but if you go to the house where Annabelle is, Annabelle, what are those two people's names? Behind the Conjuring.
Right.
Let's see. Um, Hang on, let me pause the recording. Ed and Elaine Warren, their house. That's where Annabelle is located. And Annabelle is in a now they've both passed away. He passed away some time ago. She passed away a number of years ago. And Annabelle, I'm assuming the doll still is. It's a Raggedy Ann, a Raggedy Andy doll, and it's in this like case. And apparently like priests go in and bless the casing and other things around it, because they've got a whole museum of these things. And they say don't open the case. Now that I think would be a little much for me. I'd probably be like, no, I'm not going in there.
So you're the spooky guy, and I will ask that we could go in many different directions. I'm sorry. Let me ask you: Would you have Robert the doll spend a night in your house?
No,
So this guy spooks you to where you wouldn't even put him in your house.
no, no. I mean, I just don't see any reason to take a chance on something like that. It's like, if I know this thing's got 100 and some odd years of spooking people, no, it can stay where it is in that glass case.
So now the listeners will understand my hesitation with this whole thing. Here we are talking about him, which is then you sent a wonderful text that said to make sure that I leave the lights on tonight
Yeah,
as I go home
yeah,
after doing this
yeah.
podcast, because
Sure, all the lights are on because Robert
and
might hurt you.
and so help me.
So, anything bad happens, I'll go get a text from Chris. Well, let me
Yeah,
tell you
let
what
me
I
tell
did.
you something.
What
But
I
but
did. Go ahead.
but in all seriousness, though, there is something scary about this,
Mhm.
because you have people, and I remember reading a letter that a freshman, I think it was, a freshman wrote to Robert the doll, and she claimed she was being bullied and she was having a difficult time in school. and she was writing to ask if Robert the doll would help her. And what's scary about that is because Robert has social media, he's got a Facebook, he's got X, formerly known as Twitter, I guess. He's got all this stuff, he's got followers. What's happening though is people are buying into this, if you want to call it witchcraft, sorcery, or whatever it is, they're buying into this, and it can actually create even more trauma in people's lives by thinking that voodoo or a doll or something like that could really help them. And that is something scary.
You know, I just looked when you mentioned that. I did not know that he had a Facebook page, and he does. He's got 99,000 plus followers on Facebook. There have been 5 posts in the last 2 weeks on the channel. Apparently, there's a movie or something, a documentary coming out about him called The Curse of Robert the Doll. Comes on tonight at 11 p.m. on Really channel. I don't have that, and I promise our listeners I knew nothing about that when we
Isn't that interesting though? Because I knew nothing. I didn't know there was anything.
Robert the Doll is at work,
and well, see,
we were supposed to record yesterday, remember?
yeah,
And
yep.
Robert the Doll made sure that we record this episode today. But no, in all seriousness, though, I did go on YouTube and tried to find a video of Robert the Doll moving. You know, is there video? Because you think, well, you know, if this thing's moving and all that, surely if he's in a facility like a museum, surely some cameras or something would have caught something. But I mean, there was one video where I think it looked like maybe the doll rocked a little bit, but I didn't see anything that, you know.
Well, I do know that the caretaker of the museum, they asked her the question. They said, well, is he really possessed? Is he really haunted? Is there something really wrong with the doll? And, the caretaker basically said, I've never had a bad experience with him. I've never felt uncomfortable. It's a basic relationship. I got a job to do. I do it. And Robert the doll lets me do my job. So readers can take it from this. Yeah.
In our last episode, we talked about the battleship North Carolina, the haunted battleship, and apparently the spirits there didn't let the caretaker do his job all the time without being harassed. So apparently Robert the doll is much more considerate about his caretakers.
But I will say that in probably not this year, because you say that the movie's coming out tonight, but probably next year, the costumes that will be number one could possibly be Robert the doll. I'm surprised I haven't seen a costume of Robert the doll.
Wouldn't Robert be happy with that, though?
He would be. I don't know. He might be upset because there's only one Robert the doll.
That's right.
Maybe that's why we haven't seen him.
I will tell you this. When I did watch those videos on YouTube, I saw Ozzy Osbourne visiting Robert the doll. And I mean, that's all you need right there.
And since you put that several years ago, Kim Kardashian, in order to attract attention and to gain attention at this museum, Kim Kardashian did something with Robert the doll. So there you go. Ozzy Osbourne, Kim Kardashian. What more do you need to know to stay away from Robert the doll?
Robert the doll is quite famous. He's an influencer.
So, who would have
He's
thought?
A social influencer.
He's a social media influencer. There you go. We have done our job because guess what? We've talked about him today. But it's an interesting story, but it really did freak me out, and it still does.
That's a lot of fun. Well, Chris, thanks for the topic. It's very unusual of you to come up with a topic like this, but thanks for the topic. And I hope our listeners enjoy these past few episodes where we've been talking about spooky history. I guess maybe, Chris, in the next episode, we'll return to more serious history, but spooky history is a little fun getting you into the Halloween season. So until next time, I'm Ray.
I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you later.